Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Game Develop Repeat. I'm your host, Chris, and today we're talking about Final Fantasy VIII. Before we jump into it, I'm going to note that I intend to focus more on the flaws of this game than I normally would, and that's for a good reason. The flaws of this game are fascinating. Normally, I focus on what a game does right because it's very easy to overlook what a game does right, and it's very interesting from a development perspective to try to replicate the things that a game succeeds at. In this one instance, I want to look at the things that the game does wrong because they're so tightly embedded with the things it's doing right. And it's so interesting to me how the junction system, it rides this line between like the most interesting, cool system in a Final Fantasy game ever and one of the most monotonous and frustrating game mechanics I've ever interacted with. That's really enticing, and I can't help but talk about it. So there will be slightly more negativity in one way, but it's not just going to be like bashing the game. I love this game. It's more going to just be a recognition of the flaws and ideas about what we can take away from those flaws. Um, Having said that, let's go ahead and jump into it. Final Fantasy VIII has a lot going for it, but for as much as it has going for it, it has, I would say, it has as many interesting flaws as it has interesting game mechanics, and interesting plot details and all these things. For everything that I love about this game, there is something I look at where I'm just like, I don't need to, that doesn't need to be there. There's just like a little blemish that just keeps catching my eye. Um, so the key things to know about this game, if you know absolutely nothing about Final Fantasy VIII, Final Fantasy VIII is a Japanese RPG. It is a little bit less high fantasy, right? So like wizards and all that stuff. It's less that. It's much more technological. Not extremely technological, but it definitely leans that way. You play as a mercenary for a organization called Seed that operates out of a place called a garden. This sounds very ecological. It's not that ecological. um, there are several of these gardens throughout the world. They're like these big organizations. Think of them honestly as I think of them as like university campuses, but they are militaristic and mercenary operations. So anyway, gameplay. You have turn-based battle system, few different characters. You've got like attack, magic, summons, and you have a few other interesting abilities. You've got things where you can like turn an enemy into a card for the playing card mini game. You have things where you can steal magic from enemies. We're going to talk about that a lot very soon. um and you have a little bit and just the tiniest bit of action combat where you press a button at the right time to like do bonus damage with the main character who has a squall, who has a gunblade. And then a little bit of like, you've got limit breaks where you do special combinations and hit things in the right order and that sort of thing. But for the most part, it's pretty straightforward turn-based combat. There's no super wild combat innovation in my mind. Maybe it's just that I grew up playing it, so it's kind of like setting a standard to me and it just seems pretty normal, but it's pretty cut and dry as far as the actual combat mechanics. But, and this is where the interesting stuff comes in, the summons that you have in this game, the Guardian Forces, give your characters abilities. They are a big part of your strength in this game, is what you teach your Guardian Forces and what you use from their ability sets and which Guardian Forces you equip to which characters those factors all have a very important role to play in the strength of your characters and your success in battles and whatnot. I think it's time to dive in on the junction system. And this is my first major critique and my first major praise for this game. I'm very conflicted about a lot of details about Final Fantasy VIII. You will hear the confusion as I explain this to you. You will hear the moments where I'm like, and why? What do we do to make this feel the way that it seems like it should feel? Okay, so the junction system. Essentially, I'm going to tell you the part I love first, and then we're going to get into the fatal flaw. The part I love about this system, you steal magic from enemies. How cool is that? Uh, and then you can stock up on that magic, and you can actually equip the magic to strengthen different parts of your character. So you can almost use it as like you're using the essence of fire to have more powerful attacks, or you're using the essence of stone to have stronger defense, right? It's that kind of a feeling behind it. There are a few problems here though. So thematically, that's amazing. And you're probably imagining, oh, I just steal the magic from the enemy and then I can equip it. That's so cool. Unless you've played the game, in which case you are currently having flashbacks to sitting there holding one button for an hour straight as your characters, one at a time, draw 1 to 5 spells from an enemy for your stock of spells so that you can junction it to the right ability and get more powerful because you just need those spells. And then you go into another battle and you're like, oh, it'd be really fun to use that spell, but I can't because this enemy doesn't have it. So if I use it, then I'm going to be weaker because I used it. It's okay. So sorry, maybe that didn't make it clear exactly how the system works, except for the people who have experienced it. You can hold, it's either 99 or 100. I think it might actually be 100 in this game. I'm going to say 99 because that feels like it would probably be 99, right? It's usually 99. Anyway, you can hold a maximum number of each spell. And you can junction that to an ability. But generally speaking, the way that this ends up playing out is you want a full stock of that spell, and then any spell that you have equipped to your character to make it more powerful, you're not going to use, because every time you use it, it makes your character weaker. And depending on how powerful the spell is, it might make your character significantly weaker. For somebody like me, that just turns into, oh, there's a new spell. I'm going to get, oh, it is 100, isn't it? I'm going to get a full stock of that spell. I'm going to get all 100, and then I'm just going to hold on to it, and I'm just never going to use it. And it's just going to make my character passively more powerful and whatever, right? And then you reach this point where you start to understand which spells are really good, and then you start figuring out which ways you can get those spells really quickly. And before you know it, you've broken the entire game. Everything is insanely easy, and you have absolutely no problems. Or maybe more likely, you start the game, the junction system is explained to you, you skip through the tutorial as fast as you can because it's just way too many menus and talking boxes, and you're like, I'll just figure it out. And then you go into the menu and you're like, I have no idea how to figure this out. I think one of those two things is probably what happens to most people. When I first played this game, I had no idea what was going on with the junction system. I just selected auto all the time and paid no attention to it, which is probably better for the balance of the game, if we're being honest, because it is so overpowered. Here's an additional catch, all right? Your GFs, your Guardian Forces, level up differently than your characters level up. They have a different thing that levels them up, that gives them abilities and so on. Maybe it's not specifically leveling up. Maybe it's learning abilities at a different rate than your characters level up. And the scaling of the game is based on how strong or how high leveled your characters are. So you can manipulate this and make sure that your GFs get really powerful abilities while your characters don't level up. So all the enemies stay really low leveled while you get really powerful abilities, and you can just kind of rip through the game and never go above level whatever. If you're not paying attention to this dynamic, then your characters will level up and you won't get powerful enough, and then suddenly you'll hit this spike because the level scaling works in a weird way where it's like level 1 to 19, everything has the same power level. As soon as you hit like 21, suddenly everything's really difficult. It's like in chunks. The level scaling is in chunks. At least that's what I'm not 100% on all the details, but I'm pretty sure that's how it worked. That might be worth further investigation if you're interested in this specific topic. But the result of all of these complicated mechanics interacting together is that the game is so broken in terms of like level scaling and difficulty and just becoming insanely powerful or insanely weak. It is not very clear. And more importantly, because of the junction system, it feels like you're being punished for playing the game correctly. It feels like once you've learned the system, then you're going to sit there and you're going to hold X, or was it circle? I don't know. I don't remember. Whatever. You're going to hold one button down and you're just going to keep drawing magic from your enemies until you reach a full stock. And that's just not fun. It's like taking one of the most frustrating parts of a JRPG, the grind, and making it even more grindy. And honestly, I think it's just because like people will find a way to cheat the system and become super powerful, and then we're just willing to not enjoy the game in order to cheat the system, which is like, boy, I would love to not do that. You know, it'd be really nice to just play the game and not obsess over it. But I do the same thing with Elder Scrolls Morrowind. Boy, that game has a system that you can cheat, right? We'll talk about that someday. But Elder Scrolls Morrowind is an amazing game that you should not try to min-max because it ruins a lot of the fun of the game. Unless you enjoy the min-maxing in itself, in which case, have at. That is a really fun game to do that in. Where was I? Final Fantasy VIII. Okay, so that's the major flaw of this game, is the junction system and the leveling, right? Here's why I like this. What an enormous risk they took with this junction system. It is so different from Final Fantasy VII. Final Fantasy VII has the materia system, which is a little bit more cut and dry, streamlined, but that was a big risk too. That's a wild system. But they went, hey, we had this incredible smash hit system. Let's do a game that is very different with a very different system that is just a wild swing for the fences kind of a thing. And I love it. That's the other part of this, is I love the junctioning system when it works. I love it thematically. I love the things about it that are like, you are harnessing the essence of these magics. Thematically, it's really cool. The problem is the drawing the magic, capping out at like 100 and being so variable and frustrating and slow. They just need a lower number, and they need some kind of motivator to have you keep using the magic that you're drawing. And like, maybe use the junctioning a little differently. Maybe have it be a little bit more flavorful. Because boy, oh boy, is it not is it not that enjoyable to just sit there for 100? Does it need to be 100? Couldn't it just be like 25? Maybe if it was 25, I'd be willing to use the magic. It just feels like a system where one change would change everything. Like, it just seems like one or two little tweaks to this game would take the game from being very good but deeply flawed to, oh my god, what a masterpiece. There is one other flaw I want to talk about, and it's a plot flaw. And hold on, let me decide whether or not I want to talk about this. I'm going to talk about this very vaguely. And then I'll give a spoiler warning, and then I'll give you the specifics. So I'll tell you when that's coming up. So no spoilers yet, but I'm going to speak vaguely. There is something about the character development in this game that I absolutely love. I love the way that the characters get to know each other. I love the way that the characters all mesh. I love how it builds this relationship between all of the characters. For most of the game, there is a thing that ruins it for me. And here is the spoiler. Skip ahead 15 seconds if you do not want to hear the spoiler. 3, 2, 1. There's a moment in the game where they're all like, oh, we were all orphans and we all grew up together and we've known each other the entire time. And that's why we're all bonding together. It has nothing to do with us actually getting to know each other. It's so lame and I hate it. Spoiler done. Okay, that's the spoiler. I get fiery about that. I just wish that they had stuck with the initial plan of just like how those characters were developing. I think that actually is the moment where the game falls apart for me, story wise. And then from then on, by the way, the story gets really confusing. I've beaten this game. I have no idea why it's just so confusing. I understand the plot of Donnie Darko far better than I understand the plot of Final Fantasy VIII. Having said these things, and I realize I'm being a little negative about this game, I love it because I think it has more potential to be improved than any other game in the series. When they announced the Final Fantasy VII remake, I was like, do Final Fantasy VIII. What are you doing? Remake Final Fantasy VIII. That game is so ripe for a remake. There are so many small tweaks you can make to make this game into a freaking masterpiece. This could be one of the best games I've ever played if they would just adjust a few things. It's like, oh, you just put a little too much salt in the dish. It's genius. It's great. Just remake it with like a little less salt. Oh, you used a tablespoon instead of a teaspoon. We can fix that. That's easy. The bones are there. Just stop wearing like a neon green tie with a mustard yellow shirt. Just put on a different shirt and tie, and this game is genius. All right, sorry, that's my rant. I do love the game. I didn't even get into talking about the card game, and the world building and how much I love those things. The card game is genius. I don't even have much more to say about it. I just absolutely love it. If you know, you know. If not, this game is available on Steam. I don't know how good the Steam port is. Wait, no, I do. I've played it. It worked for me, and there are features in the Steam port that make the draw system less infuriating, but it does feel like you're cheating. So if you want to play the game, if you want to experience the plot, if you want to rip through it, I encourage you, and I mean I aggressively encourage you to cheat if you play this game on Steam. Experience the grind for like 2 hours or whatever, and then once you get frustrated, just start cheating. It's fine. It's not even cheating. You're just saving yourself time. The game is so frustrating. It's really, but it's really good. But there's so many flaws in this. I'm so deeply conflicted about this game, and I think you're understanding that because I love it so much. It takes such massive risks in its game design, and then it just misses by a little bit, but it's still really, really good. And I would love to see a remake of this game specifically. But also, remakes, whatever. I've already experienced the game, so be it if it never happens. But I just think it's one of those few games that deserves the remake for the sake of better game design with small adjustments. All right, that is that. Let's move on and talk about what we can learn from this game and maybe get it a little lighter, maybe make it a little more positive. I'm feeling like this is a little too negative. I feel complainy. I don't like it. We'll make it a little more positive in the next section. And we're also going to go through what I've been doing on my game development. It has been a light week. It's been a light week. It happens. Let's move on to that section of the show. I think maybe the most important question to ask about Final Fantasy VIII is it actually that flawed? And where does this sensation of it having all these deep flaws come from? Because if it's that flawed, why do I love this game this much? It's not just nostalgia. It's not just the soundtrack. There is something about this game which is like, yeah, it's not bad. There's just weird stuff going on. What's the real flaw here? I think the real flaw is in player mindset. And this is what makes it so, so fascinating. I think that the flaw in this game is a failure to predict the fact that your players are going to take the fun out of the way they play. You will be compelled to play the game in a way that eliminates a lot of the joy because you're min-maxing everything and you're trying to do it perfectly and you're trying to experience everything in the game and you're trying to have every single power and experience and whatever because you don't know what's coming next. The game designer knows exactly what's coming next and they know that they don't need to min-max. The player has no idea what's coming up and they're like, "Oh, well, they're giving me all these options to get more powerful, so I must need to get more powerful." I think there's not a sense of here is the level to which you need to prepare. When I play this game, I'm always compelled to prepare more. So I think fundamentally, a lot of this game design is fantastic. I think the real flaw lies in communication to the player and compelling the player to take certain risks. And I think compelling the player to engage with the mechanics in a specific way that is more enjoyable is the hard task that this game doesn't quite pull off for players like me. I am sure there are players out there who do not have this problem, but for players like me, this task of telling me what the most enjoyable way to play the game is, that I think is the tricky task. So then the next question is, how do you invite players to enjoy the game? I think the answer is a kind of a railroading of the player. That's not the right word. I haven't found the right word yet, but you're putting them on tracks, you're giving them paths. This makes it sound like I'm asking for a linear game design, and I'm not. The game that I think does the absolute best at this is actually Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild, which I've been playing a lot of this past week and a half. That's part of the reason I haven't been doing much game development, if I'm honest. I've been playing so much Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild pulls this off pretty well, where it gives you a very clear structure of you use these weapons, they're going to break, and then you're going to have to use different weapons. So you got to be okay with these being disposable. In Final Fantasy VIII, you don't have to use the spells, so you don't use them, so they don't go away, so you're not okay with them being disposable. You never feel the balance of the game if you're actually using the spells that you have junctioned. There's also, there's some weird stuff there, but if the game design invites you to play the game in an enjoyable way, that's great. This is in my mind, this is one of the most difficult aspects of game design, is setting things up so that the player wants to play the game in the way that the designer designed it. Usually we're all looking for a hack or something, like a little trick. And I think I always reference Celeste. I need to do an episode on Celeste. I think one of the reasons why Celeste works well as a game is they consulted, I think, I don't want to speak out of turn here. My understanding is that they were in close contact with the speedrunning community at some point in that game's development. There's a lot of information about Celeste out there. You can find info about them for days. They are pretty open about that game, especially the sound designers. There's a lot of information from them. But that game is designed kind of alongside the philosophy of speedrunners, and speedrunners are the people who try to break games like that. So they give them their options and incorporate that sort of rebellious spirit into their design. That's it. The rebellious spirit. That's totally where it's coming from. Final Fantasy VIII does not incorporate the rebellious spirit of its players into its game design. It does not acknowledge the fact that its players are going to be breaking the ever-living crap out of it. However, it does give you a nice sandbox to do that in. So it's a little weird. Breath of the Wild gives you an amazing sandbox where you can just break the game like crazy, and it really incorporates you breaking the game to make every one of those options fun. However you break the game in Breath of the Wild, it's going to be fun, and a lot of that is because it's very physicsy. Breaking the game with stats, like in Final Fantasy VIII, is not as fun. And by the way, there's a ton of stuff within Final Fantasy VIII that we didn't even touch on. The weapons are cool, the weapon upgrading, the way that it manages your salary, because you're like working for this company or this garden, this like pseudo military organization. There's like plot stuff that I absolutely love. There's a lot we didn't cover because I just don't, it's a 30-minute podcast roughly. So I just am not able to cover everything, but there's so much cool stuff going on in there. Let's move forward with these questions a little bit. So my answer to how do you invite players to enjoy the game is acknowledge their rebellious spirit and incorporate that into your game design if possible. Next question, are design risks worth taking? Answer, yes. Next question. No, there's a little bit of elaboration on that. They took a lot of risks in this game that I think are beautiful and could move the genre forward in a lot of interesting ways and create fascinating gameplay dynamics. And it's just, I would hate for somebody to listen to this episode and think that I think that this game is a failure in the risks that it took. It is not. The risks that this game took are amazing, and the game was a success. As far as I know, I haven't dug into the financials, but I mean, it's a Final Fantasy game, right? And it's a fairly well regarded one. But how do I put this? It is not, in my mind, it is not a game design failure. It just has little missteps that are really interesting and cool, and it's so worth digging into those. Design risks are worth taking because that's how you discover new designs. That's how you discover new interesting things you can do. The next question is, how do you take those risks? And this ties in to my experiences this week. Kind of. It's a stretch, but we're going to go with it. How do you take those risks? You have play testers. That's what I think. I think if you're going to take a big risk like that, you take the risk early on. You don't flesh out the entire game around it. You just flesh out the small system, and then you have a representative play test. So for Final Fantasy VIII, this would be tricky because you would have to create the feeling of drawing all this magic over a longer period of time. It's a little harder to test, but I think there's probably a way to do it. My point is, if you're going to take a big design risk, design the fundamental system, try out the fundamental system yourself, and then realize that somebody you just drop into this is going to have a completely different experience with it than you did, because you know a bunch of stuff they don't know, including your own intentions, which they will never be able to know. So if you're going to take these massive risks, take them. And if you've got a big financial stake in this, if it's something you're trying to sell, if it's something you're trying to commit, and financial stake includes large portions of your time, by the way, if it is a financial thing for you, if you've got like a year and a half that you're planning on dedicating to this thing, maybe spend like 2 months of that setting up this little playtest, right? And then giving it to people and figuring out if the core mechanics work. Maybe you do a pen and paper thing. If you have a mechanic like this, I don't know how you would translate it into pen and paper, but I have a feeling if you did, it would be very clear very quickly that it was boring, right? Drawing magic over and over and over and over and over is not exciting. It's you would find a way to speed it up or something, I would hope. That's the end of my questions. My own game design, tying this into that. I had a play test this week with one of my siblings, tried out my game, found so many things so quickly that I want to change, because my game now looks, I'm going to brag here, it looks like a game. It's starting to look like a game. I've got the camera set up to be like, okay, it's not amazing. There are things I would like it to be able to do that it can't do yet, but it's looking real. It's got a transition between levels. It's great. It's lovely. So it looks like a game now. And I had a little play test and quickly discovered just a laundry list of things, just like so many things that were like, oh, this is a little tweak. So is this. So is this. I'm expecting this to work this way, but it works this other way. And this is coming from somebody who's already play tested for me before. So they already know a lot. I need to get somebody who's completely fresh. By the way, everybody, do you have an interest in playing a little demo of my game? I'm thinking about posting a little demo on the Discord. I need to wrap up a couple more things before I want to do that. I want to give it like an end game, right? At the moment, it just freezes whenever you finish the last level. Not freezes, it just lets you keep wandering around the level. Well, my voice is starting to give out. I've been really going in on this episode. Do you want a demo? Let me know in the Discord. If there is going to be a demo, it's just going to be in the Discord. It's going to be very very small, very incomplete. All the sound effects probably won't even be in yet. Like there'll probably just be one song looping rather than a variety of songs, less than 10 levels, just so that I can get a little bit of feedback in terms of how the controls feel, what things you expected, what things you couldn't figure out, what things I need to make clearer, that sort of thing. And I'll probably have like a little questionnaire with it. If anybody's willing to do that, with or without the questionnaire part, right? I am looking for some feedback, but honestly, if you just want to try it out, swing by. And I'll think about that. I think I might do a playtest for it. I think we're reaching that point where it would be fun to get a little bit of feedback. And obviously, this is not me doing feedback early on when taking design risks and whatever. I'm like 6, 7, how many months into this game am I? I started in October of last year, and it is April. Okay, I'm pretty deep in. So, like, whatever. But it is still valuable to do the playtests, even at this point. What else did I have this week? That is the big notable thing. I've been integrating some sound effects and generally just had a light work week in terms of game development. But the things I did do were quite valuable. All right, that's that section. Let's move on to maybe the most important part in my mind of this podcast, which is, what can we do? What repeatable behaviors are there that can help us sustain this hobby or career in the long term? This week's tip is kindness. And we're going to get specific because on its own, the phrase be kind is not a good tip. Everybody just throws be kind out there everywhere, all over the place. Everybody's like, oh, be kind to each other. Yeah, but how? And I think that is genuinely a question that should be asked and answered. And I think that because apparently that's how my brain works. My thought process is, one of the building blocks of kindness is what you believe other people are thinking or where they're operating from. And in my mind, if you are under the assumption that other people are operating from a place of evil, negativity, cruelty, whatever else, then you will not be kind to them because you think that they are being mean to you, they are an opponent now, whatever. So here's my actionable version of be kind. Take anytime that you notice that you have an assumption you are making about somebody else, something in the world, whatever, you're making an assumption that it is coming from a place of negative motivation or malicious intent. Instead, flip it on its head or flip it to neutral, bring it to the middle and find a different potential motivation, right? This could be anything from, oh, they're trying to help. What is that quote? Like, forgive them for they know not what they do. Is that a religious quote? Somebody's trying to help, but they're accidentally doing harm and they don't realize it. And then you're interpreting it as, oh, they're trying to do harm. Like maybe that's what's going on. Or perhaps somebody is just ignorant to some problem and they're trying to resolve some other problem. And then, oops, they happen to have had done some damage. And you can look at that and you can go, wow, how did they not know this? Like, that's insane. Everybody should know this. You're coming from a different worldview, right? looking at it from a neutral stance, they just don't know about that thing. And then, oops, they made a mistake. Damage was done. And now they can know about that thing. And then they can be on your side and help with it. Or my point is, this opens up possibilities. Ultimately, one of the things that we're trying to do as artists, and I feel weird saying that. I think that's like a universal thing where, like, if you're creating some kind of art, you feel weird calling yourself an artist. But one of the, it's just people. One of the things that people are trying to do is communicate their feelings to everybody else. And we all have a different way of doing it. And one of my ways of doing it is music. And another one of my ways of doing it is podcasting. And another one is game development. I'm just trying to communicate to the world what is going on inside of my weird little world. And I think each one of us is trying to do that. And if you assume that other people are just trying to communicate and be understood, then it's easier to approach them with a sort of a kindness. And if you assume that they are being malicious in some way because it had a negative effect on you, then it's going to have a greater negative effect on you than if you let yourself believe that they are coming from a place of kindness, and or at least neutrality. And let me be clear, there are times when you gotta go, okay, that person is not coming from a place of kindness and we're out, and I'm just not gonna be involved, right? That happens. Or you're like, okay, I cannot, maybe they are and I just can't identify it. And if that's the case, I'm out. I'm not going to be good for them because I cannot possibly see any kindness in their heart. Like, if you've got a situation like that, that's different. I'm not trying to be like, oh, assume that everybody is good all of the time. No, not the case. But I think it's valuable to try to see the positive if possible, especially because the more defensive we are, the harder it is to open up, and the harder it is to open up, the harder it is to create any kind of art that communicates your internal state. Art is scary. Game development is scary. It's all communicating our feelings and taking big risks and all this stuff. And it's mortifying, right? It's absolutely terrifying to be like, hey, I made this thing. Could you please put it on the fridge and put a gold star on it at the bare minimum? And then somebody comments and they're like, oh, this is terrible. Why did you think that? Right? Like, there's a lot going on there. By the way, comments on the internet, even more so, try to give them a positive spin because it's text. You have no idea what their tone of voice is. And maybe they're just in a sad place and whatever, right? All that good stuff. That's the tip. I hope that's useful. Just to reiterate the actual tip buried in that long rant about kindness and positivity. If you are interpreting something as negative and malicious, see if you can briefly flip it on its head to be coming from a misunderstanding positive place, right? A positive place that is accidentally causing harm, or a neutral place. You don't even have to believe it, but just see if the perspective exists. That's my call to action for you there. Other call to action, if you want a demo for this game, I'm probably going to do that. Probably, if you're willing to fill out a kind of a little survey thing about it, that would be even cooler. I'm not expecting anybody to be willing to do that. That's a lot to ask of you. But if you happen to be willing, that would be amazing. Let me know, shoot me a message, or just post something on the Discord. Feel free to just contact me directly on the Discord. Maybe I'll make another way to contact me, because I don't want to force everybody to enter the Discord to be the only way to communicate with me, but it's very convenient for me. And, I've only got so much energy, so that's what I'm doing at the moment. So I'll probably post the demo there. I'll try to find a way to, maybe I can post it at the bottom of an episode temporarily, at some point too. I'll try and find a way to get the demo to you all and let you try it out. Once I get it done. That is everything for this week. Thank you so much for joining me. Apologies if my voice is sounding raspy at the end of this. It's been a long recording session and kind of a, long week. It happens sometimes. That's everything. Have a good week. Create some stuff. Enjoy yourself. And I will see you next time. Goodbye.